Boa tarde, boas-vindas.
Good afternoon. Welcome to this last panel. It's a full day here at FEBRABAN TECH. And as the digital era moves forward, we also have more data being consumed and generated. So this means an increasing demand for storage and also for computational capacity. So this growth has a direct impact on the environment. And this is where the discussion comes in about the conscious use of technology. The solutions about the public cloud, this seems to be the more sustainable pathway. You have the same infrastructure between different users, saving resources and also reducing emissions. But when we look closer, we notice that not all the clouds and not all the data centers operate with the same level of sustainability. And there are basic principles. And there's information, and that should also be followed and known. So for us to make the use of data in the data centers more responsible and ecological, we're going to go into this conversation. And we're going to discuss this in IT, and this is becoming a strategic thing for companies. So this is because of the increased digital awareness and the company's search for a differential aspect in a very competitive market, increasingly competitive. So I'd like to call Agostinho Vilela, who is the CTO of the Scala Data Centers, Leandro Cesar, who is from Safra, understands a lot of IT, and Rodrigo Radaeski from Ascenti. So let's give them a hand.
Muito obrigada pela...
Thank you very much for coming. And we're going to talk about this subject that is quite relevant. So let me start with a question for everyone. So I would like you to tell us a little bit about the policies and guidelines of your respective institutions where you work, and what are the objectives, the sustainability objectives of each one. So I'm going to start with Diego. Rodrigo. Hi, thank you, Nakamura. So first of all, thank you, FEBRABAN, for the invitation. It's a pleasure to be participating in this discussion with everyone and with you. And talking about energy and sustainability, it ends up becoming a topic that is much bigger than what is approached by the company. So it's really a strategic pillar for the company. So first of all, because it deals with the planet where we live and sustainability continuously, but also because the data centers have a very important role as they deal with great amounts of energy and diesel. And in Accent, we have this. We've had this for a long time. So since 2016, we have the ISO 2014, which is environmental to manage the rest of the fuels and waste and that sort of thing. And besides that, we also removed the 50001 certification, which is energy management. That's our main thing. And we've been working with renewable energy 100% in Brazil and in Chile for 3 years now, trying to get this certification, and renewable energy in Mexico as well, 100%. So it's a very relevant topic and very strategic in the company, where we deal with this with great priority. It's not only just a topic. And Vilela, what happens at Scala? Well, in Scala, according to what my colleague said, sustainability is non-negotiable for 4 reasons. First, because data centers have a potential of generating a very large environmental footprint because of the cost of energy and diesel and the frenetic growth that we see in the data centers, digital transformation, and etc. In second place, because it's the type of credential that the customers from data centers value. In third place, because investors look at companies in a better way if the company has this. And finally, because you reduce the possibility, and if you have good credentials, you have less rejection if they know that there are good environmental practices. And we have a series of issues that our policies are based on. So Scala is here for 5 years already, and from the first day, Scala was carbon neutral. So we were born carbon neutral, and we're also proud that since the first day, we used renewable energy that is certified. And we're also proud of having the best PUE in the design. PUE is the indicator of overhead deficiency in the use of energy. So we have the best one in Latin America. We're the first neutral carbon company in Latin America. And besides that, we were the very first in the world and in Latin America to try second generation biodiesel with generators. And we have a very robust program of destination of waste and certified as well, also recycling, about lead batteries and copper cables. And we use recycling for basically it's philanthropic. So we have activities with communities and things like that. And finally, we're part of a program, a global program, which is the greatest group of data centers in the world called ICA. And it basically asks the data centers or the digital structure companies to follow up Scope 3 very closely, which is the carbon footprint and its carbon in the equipment. So we have a policy, purchasing policy that is quite assertive to make sure that our suppliers, our vendors, are actually reducing the carbon footprint. Thank you. So, Leandro, how do the IT operations talk to this? Good afternoon. Good afternoon, everyone. It's important to say that technology has a role of making things feasible. So the application of these policies, I think that first of all, we have worked a lot very closely to ESG and in order to adopt renewable solutions. So when you have modernization of the environment, that's something constant, and this is something that we have, virtualization and adoption of clouds. So we're closer to these commitments that we have. We also have the life cycle of the equipment, so we try to destinate this correctly, and therefore, we also reduce this cost. We also have operational efficiency, which is extremely important in the institution. So we try to get automation of processes so that we'll be able to have the smallest possibility or the reduction of physical resources like paper. So there's an important issue about the use of the channels. So of course, with the possibility of the channel, you open up for the customer or the investor a door where, with the app, they can solve their problems without having to go anywhere. And that's an important point, too. And finally, there's the adoption of awareness, internal awareness and education. And I think this is an issue not only from a specific area, but several programs, awareness programs about the best use of the equipment. Okay, thank you.
Mais de detalhe aqui.
I would like to get more details from Vilela related to the improvements of data centers. They became a lot better in terms of energy efficiency. Now I want to understand how this will, what will happen during this time now. What could you invest in to improve these data centers? For example, cooling. Well, there's some confusion when you say liquid cooling. People think that water is consumed, but no. And Scala Data Center is proud to say that all of our data centers do not use water. This is important because there are companies here in Brazil and abroad that do. But yes, we can improve efficiency because AI is forcing us to do that. B300 that will be made available this year can can be used only with liquid cooling. And this is an advantage because you can move heat a lot more efficiently. And we expect to have an important reduction in our data center overheads.
Power usation effect.
We have power usage effectiveness. It's an index we have to operate our data center. And when we use water, we reduce it a lot. This will lead to better efficiency, less overhead. In terms of renewable
Pletora de coisas que a gente pode fazer, né? Uma já adiantei, que é
energy, well, there's a plethora of things we can do. We can be more efficient. We can use liquid cooling, passive cooling. Also, the paint you use to paint your data center may influence in if its efficiency, and also to have better control of your data center. Also, you can improve your footprint by reducing the use of water. Do not use water for evaporation. Use recycled materials, waste management, dispose of devices in appropriate locations, and also reduce Scope 3. Scope 1, considering the GEE protocol,
basicamente a pegada ambiental da própria atividade intrínseca.
It's the activities that are part of the activities of the company. In Scope 3, it's related to diesel, to fuels. Also, we can use cooling gas that has a greenhouse effect that is lower, and also be more effective in the purchases and be careful about the footprint that they bring. This is how we can optimize this. What about Ascenti? Ascenti also follow all of these practices. Water usage is an important information. We do not waste in water. Even cooling that is carried out is used with a closed circuit of water. The water is used, then the air comes back, and we're able to cool the technical room. Energy efficiency. Well, if the bigger the data centers become, we would have more impact in terms of energy. But we start to have better efficiency in terms of liquid cooling. There are many different techniques, for example, liquid to shipping. There's also immersion cooling, machinery that is inserted in a specific liquid. And we also have other techniques for AI, but it's important to use AI to help AI, to use AI and telemetrics that are available in data centers, for example, regarding moisture, weather forecast, temperature, external temperature. All of this information is included in AI and help us manage data centers seeking efficiency. And also it's important to think how data center helps clients. As clients start to put their servers in the data center, even in the way this equipment is arranged in the room makes a difference. And we need to put either more pressure or less pressure of insufflated air, depending on the arrangement. If we insulate the room appropriately, this leads to more efficiency, and we can map this by using AI and telemetrics to improve our efficiency.
Entender o que os bancos estão fazendo aí.
Now, Leandro, tell me, what are banks doing in terms of sustainability? We have a survey research by FEBRABAN saying that 80% of banks participating, they intend to amplify their sustainability actions. What are their priorities, especially at Safra's priorities? Well, in fact, this is not just another initiative. No, this is part of the strategy. It has to do with regulations as well, and also to the interests of our clients and investors. It's important to have more responsibility over the utilization. This research highlights some digitalization issues regarding the environment. For example, expanding the use of channels.
A pegada de carbono, né?
It mentions carbon footprint, energy efficiency, and carbon neutral. There are some banks thinking about placing data centers, locating data centers in areas that are colder, so that they have less need to use air conditioning systems.
Com critérios ESG.
ESG, I mean credit with ESG criteria, meaning green lines, let's say, green credit lines, or a movement that is happening already, and there's also ESG in managing risk. Credit lines, for example, we can improve the rates charged according to the type of business of the company. If the company do not have sustainable practices, they will be charged a higher rate than other companies that do. And these are some of the aspects where banks have been investing in. We were talking on the backstage about how the market of data centers has grown, and it has demanded more resources. So, is Brazil prepared for a hub of data centers to meet the internal demands and also the demands of Latin America? What are our credentials and what do we need to do to become a relevant player? Starting with you. Well, this topic is very interesting. The market of data centers. We do not have a potential to be a hub. We're a hub already. We have a structure for data centers that is very solid and underpins our digital activities. Nowadays, banks need these digital activities. Our apps are in the cloud. Now everyone is talking about AI. Everybody's seeking for knowledge, for access to AI. And all of this is underpinned by a structure that is already available in Brazil and meets the needs of Brazil and Latin America. This is we're having a great opportunity now. AI is booming right now, and this is just the beginning of its use. This will grow more and more. In Brazil, we have a great energy matrix. 90% of our matrix is renewable already, especially hydroelectric, but we can also use biomass, solar, and wind power. We have great energy available. We produce around 200 gigawatts of energy. Our peak in February was 162, I guess. So there's a lot of energy to be used. Data centers consume just 1 gigawatt.
essa janela de oportunidade.
We have a great window of opportunity. We have labor, connectivity, infrastructure, 5 kilometers of fiber, optic fiber that feed the main data centers that we have here. We also have submarine cables available. We have the entire infrastructure. What is lacking? What is missing? What is our challenge?
Que a gente chama de rede básica.
Access to energy in the basic network, meaning in high tension. We still see some bottlenecks that we've been trying to address. And we've been talking a lot about how to make the country more attractive for foreign investment, especially for importing equipment and servers that allow AI to work in GPU. For every dollar that our clients spend with data centers, they spend $10 to provide equipment for this data center, let's say servers and other type of equipment. If we can improve our tariffs for importing, for example, if we can anticipate the benefits of our tax reform, this will make our country more attractive for us to bring in foreign capital. But there are many other countries competing with Brazil. So we have a time-sensitive window of opportunity. We also need to have local infrastructure to meet the needs of our local market. There's latency, but we also have more opportunities to bring more capital to Brazil and Latin America. What about Safra? How are you
Estudando e planejando o futuro.
studying and planning the future for data centers?
Deu spoiler aí sobre.
Well, it gave us a spoiler about our talk on the backstage. We were talking about that. Yes, we said that. We have a lot of capacity to become a hub in Brazil and in Latin America and in the world, especially because we have renewable energy here, hydroelectric power. This is a differential, competitive edge.
A menor pegada.
And we have the lowest carbon footprint when compared to any other country. And these are our qualifications, let's say our credentials.
Traz para esse credenciamento e fazendo com.
Another thing that makes us become an important country
Abundância territorial.
is the fact that we have a lot of territory and climate diversity. We have parts of the country that have negative temperatures. Maybe that's where we could install some hubs and take advantage of this climate, this weather. And another and a concern is regulation.
Pode ser ali ponto.
I think that regulation could be a barrier for our expansion of data centers, because it involves many things. And we also need to take into consideration the diversity of sources. We talked about hydroelectric power. It is clean power, but we also have wind power, solar power, and we need to have these possibilities, because then if we have a water crisis, for example, we can take advantage of other sources. In answering your first question, for Safra, well, we've been thinking about using air conditioning smartly, let's say. We carry out predictive analysis in order to fine-tune this air conditioning to have more responsible usage. How about you, Vilela? Are you optimistic about it or not? I'm very optimistic. Brazil is a hub already, like my colleague said. It's a local hub, and it could be an international hub, especially with more agnotist in terms of latency overloads. AI training, for example, media social, some of it, and some inference as well, and high performance
Muito mais do que ele faz hoje.
computing, so we can do a lot more. We could export actually computing. Brazil has a lot of land.
Energia, abundância.
We have abundant energy. We're the cleanest country in G20. 91 to 93 of our energy comes from renewable sources.
Principalmente mais pro sul.
And our climate here, especially in the south region, is very appropriate for that. And we have skilled labor as well. This is also important to be considered. If you have people that have been trained to work in that, it's important to train
Precisa vencer.
people. What are the challenges that we need to overcome? One, the first one, transmission, connection, transmission in general. Brazil produce a lot of energy, more energy than it can move, actually transport. This happens all over the world. We should increase the conductivity of the cables used. We could add batteries along the network. This helps us use intermittent networks better. We need to have an amicable territory as well. We don't want investors to have the concern of putting their AI overloads here. It needs to be tax reliable as well. They're studying a professional measure to remove some
Isso de novo contribui para a gente.
IT
E uma coisa também.
positions that are important.
Considerar
And there's another thing that is important. We're competing with other countries in the world, and we're competing with Malaysia, Saudi Arabia, India, and United States.
essa energia vai.
We looking for energy, nuclear energy, for example. If Brazil does not act, you can lose this opportunity, just like happened with pre-salt.
4, 5 bilhões.
We have about 4 or 5 billions invested in data center in Brazil. I'm talking about data centers only, not the equipment. And we can increase these numbers exponentially and make it something that moves our GPT or GDP, that makes really a difference in our country. And also we need to have a favorable environment for the United States to export equipment here. And it has to do with the way we deal with our international policy.
And to receive the GPUs. So these are extremely important for AI. And if the United States considers Brazil a friendly country, and then it's not going to give GPUs to other countries or use it to make weapons. So that's very important for us to define what it's going to be in the future as a hub. Great. So, Vilela, how urgent is this issue? So how much window of opportunity do we have, or how much time do we have so that we become more competitive and attractive? I just wanted to understand the urgency. Well, the expectation is that nuclear energy in the United States is going to become mainstream in about 2030. Some people think it's beyond that. Some people think that 2029 will already have something. So we're talking about a window of 5 years, maybe less. But I'm only talking about the United States, right? And remember that there are other countries. But I would say that it's a maximum of 5 years. But I think it's less because the data center, you take a year and a half to build. So if you don't create the movement now, when you want to make the movement, there's no time to build the data center. That's why you have to be quick. Great. And how that you had talked about this in your previous answer. So talking about AI, helping in the efficiency of AI. But I would like to extend this conversation to Leandro as well and Vilela to understand how AI is important in the promotion of sustainability. So I'm going to start with you. Hi. So besides AI helping in the management of the data center and in terms of energy efficiency and being able to make an effect failure before it actually happens. So we're talking about predictive maintenance. So the data center works with preventive maintenance to prevent a failure or as a corrective measure. So it's a third predictive maintenance category. So this prolongs the time of the equipment, the duration of the equipment, and we're going to issue less polluting agents. We're going to consume less fuel. So this is really relevant. But beyond that, AI is going to be very important for any kind of company when we talk about operational efficiency. So activities that are manual, activities that are repetitive, and eventually we have people who are not adding an analytical or critical capacity. So these activities can be done by artificial intelligence. And we're going to have a series of possibilities inside the company processes. And we're going to be able to optimize and, for example, look at our consumption. So when we look at procurement, when we talk about buying fuel or parts or oil for generators and filters, we see a certain kind of behavior and we can do more specific procurement, and it's more assertive as well. Besides that, looking at the enterprise market for the companies, AI is going to make, first of all, it's going to make us modernize the servers, the equipment, and typically in every change in the generation of hardware, we have an economy and an energetic efficiency that delivers much more processing capacity and for the companies, and it's also going to help in the energy management, in the consumption, in the purchasing of the correct equipment, so the company won't have to, place capacity that is beyond what they actually need. And also in terms of dimensioning and the distribution of workloads, and what we put to process in the public clouds, we're going to be able to have greater assertiveness, and then we consume less resources from the cloud, and as a consequence, we consume less energy. So these are some important aspects that AI is helping us with. So, Rodrigo, what does it look like in Safra? What is AI like there? Well, that's exactly what Hada said. So this is where we have worked. And I think we work according to the behavior analysis. So the capacity for analysis and anticipating a situation, this is where I believe this is going to be the turning point for operational issues as well as those associated to resources. So when we identify a different standard, there is the possibility of automatic adjustment, and this diminishes the waste. So we have worked on this, and when I talked about the data center at Safra and looking at this issue specifically, so looking at the standards and doing things in an anticipated manner so we can reduce waste. Vilela, what about the scale? Well, it's important for people to know that, patients have AI is important because if we think about the macro level, and this is important because you're always going to manage a dynamic grid with intermittent resources or intermittent ones and non-intermittent ones and constant sources, and it was easier. But now the grid is much more complex. It's intermittent or non-intermittent. You have consumers. So, that's where AI starts. And besides that, it also allows you to have the response. So people can if they have a battery at home, they can, photovoltaic cells, that sort of thing. This can be used by the data center. All data centers have the equivalent of energy consumption, and it's basically an energy source. So they are encouraged to give back this capacity for energy production. So 99% of the time, these generators, you have virtual power plants, so you create these virtual electrical energy plants with the photovoltaic batteries that you have in your home. That happens in California. And then in introspection, others have already talked about this. It's finding the point for the cooling system. So AI you can also use not only for predictive measures, but also to improve preventive measures. So it's a mistake to say that it's being done correctly. It's not. You cover that because the equipment, in spite of the preventive measures, that still breaks down. So it has to be done correctly. And we also have the data center, and we have management of changes. That's extremely complex in the data center because it can never stop, and energy and gas and certain things. And commissioning, which is basically testing the data center, and that's extremely complex. You have to generate 10,000 documents, and then you can use that to project a data center. We call that optimization. So it's finding what fits into a place, and you can use AI to foresee the amount of time. So there's a plethora of things to do with AI that can help. And finally, you cannot forget that AI is to do what it's an accelerated finding. So through AI, we're going to find materials that are going to help us to have something more sustainable, or a photovoltaic cell that is more efficient. So that's a great area for AI, this kind of acceleration of our discoveries. So you should have AI and data centers to run all of this, right? So there's going to be a lot of work. So I would like to understand if there are other ways, if you're studying other ways of compensating this environmental footprint in this growing demand for data and computational power. So I wanted to go deeper into this subject. Besides the use of these energy efficiency technologies, I'm going to start with you, Vilela. So what have you studied about this? So first of all, we have to look at the policies and not the evaporation issues of water. So all the water has to be used in closed loops. That's how it starts. And that's not only carbon we're talking about, but water as well. So there's this posture of water utilization factor of 0. So it's closed, you don't have to use the water for evaporation. And besides that, I already talked about this. You have a robust recycling policy for lead, for copper cables, and so on. And you can also efficiently use energy, so you don't have waste. And in any energy system, you have losses in the transformers, in the rectifiers, etc. So there is a surge to use higher voltage, and you have less energy losses because you have a lot of conversion. So we're talking about this in the future. We're talking about feeding the data center with a solid state, and then it will receive energy, and there will be 800 volts that will feed the system. So you don't have the rectification and the diversion that you have in the UPS. And in a data center, there's another benefit. So you reduce the quantity of copper cables, so tons. And I had already said this before, but you also reduce scope 1, which is basically to use biofuels for the generator, using cooling gases in the environmental footprint, and in the scope is to work with suppliers that look at this in their equipment. Well, besides this issue that was placed by Vilela, that is extremely important and relevant, we also have a 0 carbon footprint. We compensate all of our carbon footprint, and we only try to buy renewable energy between Brazil and Chile, and in Mexico, we're going for that as well. There are some additional points of investments and projects, environmental projects, and recovery of our fauna and flora, and cogeneration of energy projects, wind energy and solar energy. They're investing in new farms for the generation of energy, and that's very important. And other issues, our fleet of vehicles, we try to make them use ethanol, so we privilege that, and Brazilian ethanol, it basically goes in, if we analyze from the beginning of the production of the electrical vehicle until the recycling and comparing with the use of our ethanol, they're almost equivalent. So Brazil has this very strong issue, different from American ethanol that is produced with corn, and there's a different formula, it's a different sort of energy that is produced. And we also have to educate and encourage the communities where this is located in the consumption of natural resources and conscious consumption. And in a sense, we also have zero landmark, so nothing goes to the landmark and to the landfill, sorry, not the landmark. And we also have certification of these places to guarantee that it is actually happening. So these are some of my important points. Okay, so Leandro, tell us what you have done at Safra about these issues. So we have worked a lot in smart optimization of the use of the resources. So we're talking directly about better algorithms and better built as well. So as a result, we're avoiding the issue of increased processing to get the same outcome. So this is an important point that we've worked on a lot. We talked about the improvement of the algorithms. And we know that AI is one of the best consumers of computational resources, but we also notice that this has changed. So thinking about smaller models, more personalized models, and not having the issue of the more generic model providing a lot of information. Maybe that's not as efficient for that question. So this also reduces the processing capacity, and the result is more adequate as well. There's also the issue of circular economy. So I think we've looked at that a lot, which is the life cycle of the equipment. So we have looked at this, we have looked mainly at these two things. Great. So we're coming to the conclusion of this panel, but together with the final remarks, I would like to hear from you habits that we had to change in the management of data centers and IT to save energy and to also think about a more sustainable future and a more rational one as well. So I'm going to start with you, Vilela. I think that in the data center, the overhead that we have with energy is basically computing, because it doesn't only waste extra energy that the data center needs to bring, but you also have to buy more equipment for the generation of a backup. So you're also talking about the carbon footprint in the equipment. And how are you able to improve this? So it has to be more efficient. Water is more efficient than air. It's 300 times more efficient in terms of spreading heat. And the use of the assets and how you paint the data center so that you can reject heat better. And the location of data centers is also important. Depending on where you put it, it can be intrinsically more efficient, so that's an important criterion as well. Granularity of how you cool things, how you cool the data center, so customer starts using all the racks, so you don't have thousands of racks on the first day. Each rack costs $3,000, $4,000, so if it is a data center for 1,000 racks, you don't have like this. You don't have this from one day to the next, right? And you are not efficient with all of that. So definitely you have to look at the granularity, the electrical granularity, and how this can be efficient even with low use, and also for energy losses that I talked about before. So you're talking about continuous current and higher voltage and trying to avoid the rectification step, and these are the issues that we have there. And in IT, I've worked with IT for a long time, so this is what the colleague said before. So Linux, for example, the kernels were much more efficient in terms of communication. The LLM models, that also makes a difference. So DeepSync, for example, was, it showed that it was more efficient. It was a more efficient model for training, and the inference also looking at the quantification. And finally, we have very interesting techniques with hardware. So you're using zero voltage switch in the EVS and in the computers, so the batteries dissipate less heat. And we also have the whole structure, optical structure, and it's close to the chip. So instead of being in the edges or in the panels, the chip is more centralized, which is what many players are doing, and you can reduce the dissipation of heat and optical computation 5-fold. Great. Leandro? Well, I think there's an issue here about strengthening the culture of efficiency due to strategic priorities. And it's not only cutting the cost itself. I think we have an issue that is, how can we use our computational resources? So this is always inside the first part of the discussion. I think it's going to be a difference. Another point that I also believe in is about the systemic deactivation of underused resources. So it's common for us to have that workload that says, okay, we have very little, but when we keep it running, so this consumes an important part of the computational resources, and obviously it ends up spending more. So this practice is also something I believe in, and I think it makes a difference. You have monitoring and continuous measuring. I think it's no use talking about these studies. If you don't measure it, you can't control it, right? That's very important for this topic. And finally, I think there's no way we cannot go back to talking about internal awareness. There's a cultural issue that is important, and continue the incentives and training and all that. So I think these are the practices that I think make a difference. Great. And Heather, your final remarks? I think we have 2 points that I wanted to talk about. So the choice of your data center is going to be an important partner for you, especially when you talk about sustainability. And just some guidance. If you understand the company that you're quoting and that you're analyzing, visit their data center. I think it's an important point. The data center is open to the customers for them to make a tour and to make looking at the generator, how the maintenance is done, how the cooling is done, where your computer is going to be, and the technical room that it's going to be in, what is the temperature there. So that's very important. It's a myth that the data center has to be really cold. So the standards are different today. It can work with higher temperatures, and this helps in the energy efficiency. So visit the data center. That's an important point. And look at the certification, if it has the certifications, and if in practice that certification is actually part of the daily routine of the company's processes. That's the first aspect. The second aspect is trust the data center so that it can help you to design and create your solution. So, for example, Accent doesn't talk about management of systems or what hardware to use or not, but we can actually help a lot in the placement of these servers and how to project or how to place these servers so that we can gain efficiency, and even the customer can consume less energy, because this is a pricing factor in the end. So the energy that they're going to hire is going to impact the price of collocation of the data center. And these are important aspects that I wanted to add here, because if you have we have first-class infrastructure, first-world infrastructure, and when we go abroad, our data centers are just as good, and
capacitadas e conhecem bastante.
this we also know about the market, and I think we can contribute a lot, and then you can actually become a business partner or a vendor. Thank you very much to all of you, Rada, Leandro, Vilela, for sharing knowledge and giving us such important insights. I would also like to thank the audience who has been with us in the auditorium and virtually. So have a good evening. Thank you.